Thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, we're going to be talking about a wonderful memoir that's going to remind each and every one of you, should you decide to let it grace into your hands, that each and every one of us have a bright light that burns. Interestingly enough, that's exactly the title of this book. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our special guest, Ms. Dee Wallace. Dee, thank you for joining us here on the program today.
Oh, I'm so happy to be with you, Daniel. Good morning.
I remember the very first movie I seen you in. For those of you people, this is an actress here we're actually talking about that's very well known. And that was Cujo, of all things, believe it or not.
Wow, that was the first one, huh?
That was the first one, you know, and then the last one was The Frighteners, which to me was just a fantastic movie. But you think of the contrast and you know, and the things that you've been involved with that I didn't even remember, like, for instance, 10 and the like, and you realize this is quite a body of work, but then you start realizing, well, how did somebody become inspired to go this direction with their life? And I guess it all begins with your mother.
You know, it absolutely, she was a huge catalyst, you're right. But I think creative, and we're all creative because life is creation, but people that go into professions like acting and art, I think we're just called to it. I know my daughter was dancing in my stomach before she ever came out, and I think I was too. But my mother, yes, I remember the moment. I mean, I had danced and taken what we used to call, back in the old days, elocution lessons, right, and learned readings and stuff. But I remember the moment sitting in church. My mother always, around Christmas time and Easter time, did this 30-minute presentation, which we would call a monologue these days, and people from 4 states would come to see her perform. And I remember sitting there watching her do a piece called The Crucifixion at Easter and looking around and see I get emotional when I go back to that moment, seeing all these grown men and women moved and tearing up and lifted up by what my mother was doing. And I remember sitting there going, my mommy did this. I want to do this. And she was a huge catalyst all my life.
And it was certainly true, too, that as you pursued this endeavor, that both of your parents were very supportive, but things weren't always so easy in that respect.
Well, yes, I come from an extremely poor family. We lived most of the time with my grandmother. And my father was an alcoholic all my life, and ultimately ended up committing suicide my senior year in high school. So there was a lot of dichotomy, you know, a lot of polarity, a lot of yin-yang stuff going on in my life, because I always felt very loved and honored and cherished by everyone in my family, and yet there was so much discord, so much poverty, so much fear, and you know, I felt like I was constantly sleeping with one eye open to make sure my little brother and I were going to be okay, and my mom was going to be okay, because once he started drinking, he never got physically abusive, but hugely verbally abusive and emotionally abusive, and I took it upon myself, you know, that I was the caretaker after my older brother left. So there was just a lot of kind of confusion in a young girl, you know, between, wow, I'm so loved and I'm so afraid and tormented kind of at the same time. It was hard to kind of figure that out. And I trace a lot of that in Bright Light, and how, you know, the one side and the naivete and the knowing and feeling supported by the world took me so far. And then when I reached that huge fame and fortune in with E.T., I had to pull myself back in because of many of the messages that I received when I was little. And I say in the beginning of Bright Light, and thank you for reading it, and thank you for loving it.
Oh, believe me, I was something, just to let the audience know, that I went into, the memoir is not a heavy-duty long one, but it's rich. And in fact, you actually mention a book in there that I always like to recommend to people because of its simplicity. It's something you can read in a couple of hours. Yours takes a little longer, fortunately. And that was Zen and the Art of Archery.
Yes.
Because of what you put in your book, it really gets to that point where you really sort of unfold the core of the onion and realize I can grow from here no matter where I'm at. And that's, to me, what I really grabbed from it the most.
Daniel, I think that's the best, nicest thing anybody that's read the book has ever said to me, because that was my intention, is that people could pick up this book and go, oh, my God, I remember when I gave up my light. I remember when I pulled back my power and my joy and the love of who I am, and I can turn that back up. I can get that back now. And I think that everybody in the world, you see it from Egypt throughout Wall Street, and everybody is going, no, we want the truth again. We want to know again that we are in charge of our destiny, and we can make that choice through love.
Right.
And, well, thank you. You just made my day, my week, and probably my year with that. So.
It's flattering that I get to know someone like you, that I had that opportunity in the first place.
Well, thank you.
But, that's the thing that, for instance, I've been doing this show for 7 years now, or at least 7.5 years, and broadcasting for about, say, 12 to 13 years. It was always a dream of mine back when I was a child, to spin the records, be like the Wolfman Jack or the Machine Gun Kelly out of Los Angeles, and you sort of put those things aside, and you become inspired by those people such as yourself who sort of found something that you got a hold of and you just went with it, you continued through it. But I decided, why don't I just try? Why don't I go and do this? You're always talking about it. And it just amazes me what things come to you, that power of intention you talk with, but it takes action. When you're moving in action, it's amazing what you attract. And to be sitting, here today talking with you after seeing you in various movies and being able to hear that bit of flattery, to me, just charms me like crazy.
Well, but it's true. You just, you got it. And I think we're all ready. We're all so ready to love ourselves and be the joy that we were when we came in. We're so tired of the worry and the victimness and the anxiety that we have created ourselves as. And that's the big thing that I really think people, with all this secret and law of attraction stuff and everything, what the biggest misnomer that everybody has is that none of it is about creating the stuff. It's about creating you and who you are and how you love and empower yourself. And once you get that in place, which we've all lost, I mean, come on, from the time we're 2 years old and socialization begins, we're taught to turn ourselves down, don't speak our mind, give our toys away, and then we wonder why we can't figure out what we want, right?
Exactly.
And I think there's a truthfulness, which is why it's no mistake that I was chosen to star in the movie E.T., because it's all about somebody trying to get home, and the biggest home we can get to is back to ourself, back to our God self. And you can't do that if you turn your light down. You got to keep that heart light on. And that's what we create with, is the light of who we are. So I know my Baptist preacher comes out here, but I get really passionate about the discovery of all this, and the experience that you get filled up when you actually make the choice.
What's really interesting, too, and what clearly came through, it started making me think throughout the day and throughout the week, and I started really paying attention to my thoughts, and that was when you talk about judgment in your book. And if I remember, that starts with an acting class that you were taking. I could never remember his last name, but Charles comes to mind. Yeah, Conrad, that's it.
Yeah.
See, and here was the thing, I was trying to remember his last name by thinking of William Conrad, who narrates the Rocky and Bullwinkle program. But I still couldn't remember his last name, no matter how much I tried.
Dude.
But, it's interesting because when you take a look at judgment, we see that as one of those apparent sins that were put on the tablets for Moses and says, "Thou shalt not judge." And we realize the biggest sin that we truly commit with that is that we tend to judge ourselves in relationship to the world. And I think that's what really came through. And really, those were the barriers he was really breaking down for the people that actually participated in this class.
Well, yes, and the more I moved into my acting career, the more I understood, like Zen in the Art of Archery, that it was a metaphor for the creation process itself. And Charles used to say, don't judge the material, because once you judge the material, you cannot open your channel and deal with it in a you allow all the information to move through you as the character. Mm-hmm. And isn't that true in life? Mm-hmm. As soon as we judge life, this is bad, this is good, I'm less, they're more, I'm too old, I'm too fat, I'm too thin, whatever it is, when we judge the material of us or the world, we limit ourselves instead of opening ourselves to all the possibilities. But again, how long have we been taught that? From the beginning of time, and certainly from, a year and a half on in our own lifetime. Watch yourself. What are they going to think? I remember my mom saying, I know you're not doing anything out there in that car that you shouldn't be doing with your boyfriend, Dee Dee, but the neighbors don't know that. What are they going to think? I don't want you sitting there. Mm-hmm. So, I was bad, even though I hadn't done anything. and I think we're constantly looking over our shoulder going, okay, is the world judging me? Mm-hmm. And therefore, if you're focused on that, you're automatically judging yourself, aren't you?
Mm-hmm. And what really comes clear is, as I was reading those areas, and in fact, you actually went on to create an acting class for yourself for people, and I thought, this would be an interesting way if people want personal transformation, not to become actors or actresses, but simply to allow that creative force to be authentically expressed through us, truly. And I realized how empowering that can be for all of us if we could just get to that point, 0 point, if you will, from the beginning and step forward. And I remember there was one particular story, I think it was about, was it a gal or guy? It was somebody that was in your acting class where you had them move through a particular scene and they had never seen it that way before, and then they never came back again.
Oh, yeah. It frightened them so much that they got in touch with the truthfulness mm-hmm. that would have expanded them had they been able to embrace it, mm-hmm. But it's like, when we're little, we're scared to death of the monster in the closet. The only thing that makes the monster go away is turn on the light and walk into the closet. But you're too afraid to get up and go, mm-hmm. And it's a very simple metaphor, but it's true. A lot of people say to me, well, how can you justify doing all these horror films and being a healer, And I say, dude, I've been studying fear for 30 years. Right? And we're all running away from the monster of us, all these limiting beliefs and these fears. And we think that we're living our lives, but we're living our lives in a much smaller way because we're not looking at what we need to unload.
Mm-hmm. Even more interesting, Dee, is that about a year or so ago, we had the opportunity to have Marianne Williamson on our program.
Oh, beautiful.
And I brought up horror movies. And it was really funny because, as I described her, I said, do you find it interesting that in horror movies, especially over the last 20, 30, almost 40 years, is they tend to always star either teenagers or young 20-somethings. And to me it seems, and they're always being killed off in these things, and it's sort of like, I think there's a voyeuristic approach that it's the older generations looking at that and finding ways just to destroy these young lives because they have so much time ahead of them. And she thought that was kind of funny, like, I never thought about it that way, but you're right.
Well, but you know, Daniel, look at all the Disney things, right? The Disney things all have bad people, you know. They all have witches. They all have somebody that's out to get the princess or the mermaid or whatever we're dealing with. And I used to be really, really, really involved in work for children's self-esteem. I think that's one of the most important things that we can do in our lives is enhance a child with their own self-esteem and their own self-love. And I would read all of these different psychological takes on all this, stating how important it is as a part of our culture because it gives a child practice in being able to handle fear in a very safe way. Now, it's great because at the end of all those Disney movies, the fear always gets conquered, you know, the princess always wins, and they live happily ever after. So right there, we're getting the message, if you just conquer your fear, maybe you too could be the Little Mermaid. You know, but we don't. We keep stuffing them down and not looking at them. And, you know, we all know fear's an illusion and blah, blah, blah and all that stuff. And so I wanted to know why, because you sure as heck cannot be the bright light that you are. You cannot show your bright light to the world if you do not love yourself enough to heal yourself from the illusions of lack and fear and self-judgment and self-worth. It's not possible to have that happy ending that we want. And who's in charge of it? Nobody but us. Mm-hmm. You know, I say in the beginning of Bright Light, this is my story, but it's yours too. Mm-hmm. We have all been hurt. We have all been abandoned, used, raped in some way, humiliated in our lives. All of us. They are not going to come back and make it nice. They're not. In this moment of now, we're the only ones that can create our lives the way we want them. But we got to love ourselves enough to do it. Love is our power, and self-love is our power. And self-love is not the same. I got to tell you, I take a big issue with all this ego stuff. Mm-hmm. Because people say, yeah, but my ego got in the way. I said, well, who is in charge of your ego, dude? You are. Right. You don't like your ego, then tell it to, you know, take a hike. Right. I mean, come on. It's like the devil made me do it. Remember? Oh, who was it that used to do that? The African-American comedian that was so hysterical, and he'd dress up and he'd go, no, the devil made me do it. I didn't do it. That's kind of how I look at the ego. Mm-hmm. Well, and what's fascinating, too, about this memoir that you have is that it takes you through, and you, like a lot of us, we're trying to get to that authentic core self to realize there's a lot more magic, a lot more miracles, a lot more gifts that are available, but because of all these little ties that bind us, we block a lot of that from coming through. And in fact, it was because of that that as you were approaching to do the movie E.T., which Steven Spielberg had seen, apparently you had done something for him where he says, this is what I want on this movie here, that the negotiations were getting complicated to a point that it almost didn't happen, and that would have been a real opportunity that you would have lost had that continued in that direction. Absolutely. and like I say in the book, I'm a big believer in naivete. I think it was my naivete, which I define as blind faith and trust, when I first went to New York, that created this career that went from nothing to starring in the biggest blockbuster of all time within 5 years. That's unheard of in my business. But it was also my naivete that created some problems for me in this life, because I was raised to do everything right and follow the rules and be the good little girl that, doesn't do anything wrong. So at that time, there was a new trend starting where big directors wanted to start the movie without the credits. I think, I can't remember the guy's name. One other, maybe it was Francis Ford Coppola. Or who did Star Wars?
That was George Lucas.
Yeah, George Lucas. Maybe he was the guy that did it. Anyway, somebody had done a movie where they didn't use any credits at the beginning. And that's what they wanted to do with E.T. But the Screen Actors Guild rules were that wasn't okay. You couldn't give up your billing. Right? So it was cut and dry to me that I wasn't supposed to do that. And it was a real naive way to look at things. And there was also some salary discussions there, because, again, what's fair? I'm from Kansas. And so everything is kind of, Pollyanna. And I kind of still like it that way.
Right.
It's very clear to understand the world that way. But, it didn't make sense to me that I'd done these two very small independent films and made this much money, and they wanted to pay me less on this big film.
Right.
So, anyway, fortunately, it all worked out. But in retrospect, and, you really have to read the book to understand how all this works through. But that story of me in the back seat coming home from my recital, when I said, "Oh, Mommy, I was good, I was really good," and my aunt nailed me and said, "Deanna Bowers, don't you ever say that. Good little girls don't ever say that. You let other people say that, and then you deny it."
Oh, boy.
And it was, okay, it's not okay. It's not okay to know you're good. It's certainly not okay to say you're good. I need to shut my light down. I need to pull it back in. I need to not know and experience my greatness. And so all of these things that were taking place with E.T. subconsciously was a reaction from those moments of my childhood going, Dee, this is a big director. This is a big movie. This is your big shot. You're getting too big, too fast, too much. You better pull it back.
Oh.
And I think that's literally what happens to those of us. And then some of us are given the message, it's okay, don't care who you walk over, don't care who you use, just go do what you have to do at the expense of anybody else. Well, we don't want that message either, do we?
No.
But in the middle is the truthfulness of our light that is based in love. And when we are filled up with that amazing experience of love and know that every creation that comes from us is directed with that energy, that is empowering yourself and empowering the world to receive your empowerment, and everybody wins.
Now, it's really quite neat, too, because like you said, it's like you stepped into your movie career, and within 5 years, you're, within this large blockbuster, that it just seemed everything was working out, almost, like in the movie Forrest Gump, the guy just seems to tumble his way into every opportunity. And I think a lot of people feel moved by that because they wished that it could seemingly be that easy. And I think when we talked about judgment earlier is that we tend to judge situations to not be as easy as that other guy is. But yet the messages and the opportunities do come to us in tremendous abundance, but we tend not to see them. And for instance, like for you, I mean, you got to star, in a couple of movies where your husband gets to be your husband or lover in these movies. It doesn't get any better than this.
No, and I've got to tell you, we held that intention when we got married. That we were going to work together as much as we could. A lot of people think that I said, well, I'll do the howling if Christopher does it. That's not true, and you hear the fabulous story about how that went down in Bright Light. But we held the intention of that. When Dan Black called me for Cujo, he said, I want Chris to play your lover in this. I had nothing to do with that. Now, I did have something to do with The New Lassie when we started in the series The New Lassie together, because Chris wanted to direct. I had done a series with my producer, Al, before that. So when he called me about The New Lassie, he said, well, I want you and Chris to star in this together. And I said, Al, I want you to give him a shot to direct. I wanted that in my contract. I want to give him a shot to direct because that was one of Christopher's dreams. Well, so they gave him one shot. They loved so much what he did, and they loved him so much that he ended up directing 5 episodes. So, but the intention is so important, and you can't hold an intention if you're in doubt.
Right.
It's the doubt that does us in. And when you're naive like Forrest Gump, you don't have the doubt. Because you're again in this kind of, yes, Pollyanna trust and faith that the world's going to show up. And because you're holding that vision, it does. But we are so ingrained to manipulate and control and figure out and go to our mind first instead of what really creates in our life, which is that divine spark, the divine idea, the intuition, the instinct. When we can balance the masculine, feminine, and child around all of that and have that instinctive divine idea and then incorporate our minds as how to create that in our life, then, the child or the creation is a no-brainer. I mean, when the sperm and the egg come together, they know how to make the kid, right?
Exactly.
and it just happens. And really, when I teach my workshops, I give people a thing of Play-Doh, and I tell them to make something, and then I say, how many people think it's perfect, and nobody ever does? And I say, okay, squish your Play-Doh up and make something again. And if we could just understand that the creation process is that simple. If you don't like your life, make something else.
Now, a lot of people would find that very difficult to do. Otherwise, the self-help genre wouldn't be as explosively large as it is. Everybody's promising these secrets or these ways or this path. And they're all well-intentioned, but they go and they might do the exercises and live that day, as you're talking about, clearly, without doubt, trying to attract the things they believe they want in their lives, yet not seeing it manifest probably in the amount of time they believe it should happen.
Yes.
But as you talk about, you can see in your book, the fact is it's about creating habits. You can't just erase this stuff.
It's about creating yourself.
Right.
That's what it's about. And I say at the end of the book, oh, my God, I finally got it. Nobody can take me away but me. Nobody can create me but me. I am in choice and the only one that can get up every morning and go, I choose joy today. No matter what happens, I choose to be joy. I choose to be the vibration of love. I choose to be the vibration of freedom. Now, universe, whatever you bring to me, harmonize that with what I am.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what I mean. We're going. It's almost like, you know, the old signing the contract with the devil. Well, if I do all these things, if I say these affirmations for 15 minutes, if I meditate for 3 hours, then I'm going to get this stuff.
Right.
And it's not about that. It's about, no, I'm going to create me as a peaceful being who experiences itself in love.
Mm.
Then, by law, the universe has to match that vibration. So if you're not creating you first, then you are not creating your life the way you want it to be.
Mm-hmm. Time to make that change, so critical. For those of you just tuning in, we're talking with actress Dee Wallace. Her book is Bright Light, Spiritual Lessons from a Life in Acting. Like I said, you know, from what I was reading, it just was amazing to think, why not go take an acting class? Because a lot of your stuff would really come up. The things that probably are really blocking you from moving in the direction that you really want to move. And certainly you transformed into a healer. Was that something you kind of expected from all this?
Are you kidding me? If you told me I was going to write books on creation and do privates all around the world every day and have 2 talk shows on about creating your life, 20 years ago I would have said, are you crazy? I'm an actress.
Right.
You know, but I dropped to my knees one night and I said, I don't want to be this way anymore. I'm angry. I'm a victim. I don't like me, and I want my light back, and I want a way we can heal ourselves. I am a great believer in the fact that, you know, if other people inspire you, great. Go share your energy with them. But bottom line, we got to take the responsibility to heal ourselves. Nobody's going to do it for us. We've got to choose to shift. And that was the beginning of all of this. And I can look back now like my life was perfectly orchestrated in learning about energy, even as far back as studying with Charles Conrad, and then trying to conceive my beautiful daughter. I worked with an acupuncturist who taught me how to run energy through my hands. You know, just from here to here, sort of like what happened to me in New York. Here, Dee, we'll take you here. Here, Dee, we'll take you there. Here, Dee. You know, and our job is to just go.
Mm-hmm.
It's go, experience, right?
Right.
And shift. And if we could just walk into the scene of our life, like Charles taught us to walk into the scene in acting class, where we get our energy up and we trust. And we go, I haven't made decisions about this. I haven't decided where I want to go. I haven't decided how I'm going to play this moment. And I'm open, let the energy move through me. And it was magic, Daniel. It was magic to watch what happened. I just had an audition yesterday for NCIS.
Mm-hmm.
And I just sat out there. Everybody else was going over the lines and, you know, working the lines and rehearsing the lines. And I sat out there and breathed and just deep breaths and chose to just stay in the experience of love. I really don't know what I did in the room. When I walked out, I went, I'm not sure I nailed that at all. But I just got a call from my manager that I'm one of their top choices. So that's what I mean. Before, I would have gone in, okay, I have to do this, I have to break down there, I'll manipulate this moment this way, you know. And when I got in there and really was her, it didn't come out that way at all.
Wow.
So for me, that's a real high in acting, is when you can literally be in the moment of the experience, right, of what the character is going through. And isn't that what we want to strive for in life, is being in the moment of now? So many of us spend our entire lives either in the past or in the future. And that, if we can stay in the moment of now, You can create anything hurtful from the past, and in this moment of now is the only time that you create the future in. If you keep looking at your creation in the future, when you get to the future, your creation has to move further into the future because that's where you've always seen it.
Right. Yeah, I was just thinking as you were saying all of that, that feeling of when something seems to be working through you sort of lose yourself and find yourself. And reflecting back to the book that you mentioned, The Zen and the Art of Archery, as the shot releases itself. And I think a lot of times, especially in the Western world, that seems too illogical to understand, but I actually have had many experiences like what we're talking about, and you wished you could just stay there and it could just be that continuous, infinite moment that you're describing there. And there was a night that we were out, it was a friend of mine and I playing basketball. It was an outside court, kind of on a slopey hill, and so we were playing, and it was interesting. He says, I'll tell you what, I'll give you bragging rights. I said, what do you mean? He says, I'm going to go ahead and pick a place for you to shoot the ball, and if you make it, then you've got bragging rights. And I can't remember what that was all about. But then I was actually studying a lot of this kind of stuff. Carlos Castaneda, Eugene Harrigal, for instance. And so I just remember a part of it, the sun was starting to go down behind the hill, so it was really one of those neat, unique, universal moments. So he picks this spot that's 3 or 4 feet off of where the top of the circle of the free throw line would be, so you're out there quite a bit. And then I remembered in Carlos Castaneda's book, he talks about finding that spot that's uniquely yours where the energy will feel it'll be just tremendous. So kind of feeling my way in that spot where he told me to go. And then I just kind of look up at the sun, and I just was sitting there reflecting, kind of like vibrating into the moment. And I tell you, I literally released the shot. I wasn't even looking at the basket. It just let itself go. And it drops into the bottom of the net. He just stood there looking at me, and I was almost just as amazed as he was. I played a lot of basketball, but that was that, it just released itself moment. And you want to have more of those. And even as I do broadcasts like with you and I today, those moments of something that works through you and it comes out, it's just really incredible when you experience that. And it isn't about the fame or the fortune or any of that. It's about the doing and the being, just like you're talking about.
It's that moment of creation, and I think it's as simple as all of us claiming and directing, because I'm a big believer and knower that you must direct your energy, or one of my favorite lines is, if you don't create your life, you become the created upon.
I agree. Does life happen to you?
Yeah, right. And again, we just need to own that new, unlimited, new thought that most of us have never thought, that we are in control and in creation of every moment of our life, and that it's our true desire and direction to live in that beingness of that magic. And you're seeing it happen more and more and more and more every day. The expansive journey that's going on right now is huge for all of us. So I'm telling all your listeners that if this is the first time they're hearing any of this, it doesn't matter. You've come at exactly the right time. Just get up in the morning and go, I choose to be love, I choose to be clarity, I choose to know, and I choose freedom. And your life has got to start changing around if you just hold the focus on that. Agreed,
totally. I remember many years ago seeing the movie The Howling, but I vaguely remembered it. So a couple of years ago, I'm at the library, and there it is, and I decide I'm going to go ahead and check this out. And I cracked up laughing as I'm watching this because of the fact that you've got basically a premise where you go up to this camp, so to speak, for self-discovery.
Right.
And I was like, I don't remember that. So it's funny to revisit movies, that you vaguely remember and you check them out again, but you see them differently. And I thought, but then this is also a camp with a lot of lycanthropes. So we got some problems here.
Well, but you see, it's so interesting that he was studying the darkness from the fear of man and what it created, and how he could eliminate that from the human psyche so that these monsters could be held down within, their beingness. So even in this stupid little horror film, I attracted studying this. You look at Cujo; it's the same thing. It's fighting and winning from the darkness that happened to this sweet, lovable, beautiful dog because of an outside force, right? And how the world has to deal with it. I mean, you can laugh at me for seeing all this stuff in these horror films, but if you break it down, it's exactly what we're talking about. And it's exactly what The Little Mermaid and, Snow White and all of them are talking about.
Right. Did Drew Barrymore ever get over her anxiety about E.T. being dead?
Oh, I'm sure she did the first check she got, babe.
I just remember you shared that story where you put her on the lap and you thought everything would be okay, and as soon as she went in there, E.T.'s dead, she flipped out on you. Oh, my God,
it was so funny, because I talked her through the whole thing, it's just pretend, and he's not really dying, because she thought he was real. And he's acting just like we're acting. And she looked right at me with that quintessential Drew Barrymore thing. She says, I know, Dee. So I thought, okay, we're fine, Picked her up, took her to the set. She took one look at him and went, she's dying! And, and of course that was perfect for the scene because she was all in the emotion and everything. But it's interesting working with kids, and I've worked with a lot of them, that at that age, the reality and fantasy cross over all the time.
They certainly do.
And really, for any good actor, they do.
Now, it's also great, too, because even though we have to try to, I shouldn't say overcome, but at least, I guess, absorb the obstacles that we have for what they are, and that is opportunities. Sometimes people say, I don't think I attracted this particular obstacle. This is pretty overwhelming. Why can't things kind of stay the way they were before where it was easier? And you certainly have a lot of those throughout your life. And I think a lot of people in entertainment, that what a lot of people I think who watch entertainers don't understand is there's a lot of giving of themselves. I mean, there's a lot of energy that it takes to do that craft. And, and when you have a tremendous obstacle coming your way and you realize I still have to continue what I promised to do, no matter how hard it seems. And I guess I'm getting to the point referring to your husband, Christopher, who had died while you were filming Frighteners. And yet the gift from Peter Jackson to allow you to just, he's like, this is just a movie that you're doing here. Why don't you go, this is your life? And to hear that, and to actually move through that, tell us about that experience and what you gained from it.
Oh, gosh. You got an hour? Well, it was one of the hardest, and yet one of the biggest catalysts, I think, of change in my life. I had depended incredibly on Christopher. He was my rock. He was my emotional balance through much of my life because I was all over the place. I didn't always sound and be as balanced in the clarity that I am right now. And so he was my soulmate, my best friend, and of course the father of my beautiful daughter. And when he died, it was it was a part of me,
Sure.
And he had had a heart attack first, and I'd flown back from New Zealand, and they'd done an angioplasty, and he was just fine. He was coming home the next day, and he said, go back. They're holding filming on you. You have to go back. And in retrospect, the universe and Christopher created this perfectly so that I could come back and have some time with him before he actually did leave. 4 days later, I was back in New Zealand and I got a call that blood clot had hit his heart and he was gone.
Mm-hmm.
So I flew back, did his party, took my baby back with me, and finished shooting. And, you know, Peter said at the end, the whole crew presented me with this beautiful little statuette, and he said, you know, Dee, we just applaud you for your courage. Nobody ever thought you'd be back. And they had figured out a way to film around me and, you know, with an extra and stuff like that. So I learned how strong I was. I learned what it feels like to lose love and then to choose to move back into love. But that was also the catalyst that made me hit that floor and ask for help. And it was the catalyst that made me go, I'm going to get me back again. That was the beginning of getting me, Deanna Bowers, the love of who I was, back again. And I don't think, you know, there was any accident that Christopher knew that and chose to help me on this journey by leaving, quite frankly. And, you know, God never gives you more than you can handle, right? But sometimes I wish he wouldn't trust me quite so much. That's kind of what that whole experience was. But I often wonder if I hadn't had my beautiful daughter and had to go on and had to create again, I'm sure I would have, because that's how we're made. Mm-hmm. Ask anybody in Joplin, Missouri. They have a choice right now. Do I give up or do I create again? And we are made to be consistent, constant creators. So no matter what the loss is, we can always choose, and usually do, to rise up and create again. I just would like to invite everyone to know that we could stay in the moment and that knowing of creation and choose to create right where we are. We don't have to create the disease to create health. We don't have to create the lack of money to create the flow of money in our lives. We simply must create and focus on what we want. We're so tied into these polarities, which are illusions. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the greatest message I can give everybody is we think we're creating by looking at what we don't want to create. And it's an oxymoron. You can't do it. You can't resent money, worry about money, be afraid of money, you know, be angry at money because you don't have it, and then turn to the universe and go, could I have some more money, please? You know, it's you're not in harmony with what you're asking for.
Right.
And that's what I mean by create you first. Mm. Create the peacefulness and the love within you, and then all things will match that. Completely agreed. Now, Dee, you host, as I understand, an international radio show? Two. I have two on Monday nights at 5 and Thursday mornings at 8 a.m. And you know what? You can find direct links and lots of great free stuff and everything about my acting and everything on IamDeeWallace.com. That's my website. There's lots of information and lots of things to listen to and read and all kinds of stuff. You can find everything about me there, including Bright Light. You can even order Bright Light from there. Barnes & Noble has it. Most of your New Age bookstores have it. If they don't, tell them to order it. They can. And Amazon.com, you can get Bright Light. And, you know, even if you just want to read about the fun stories of all these great directors and everything, the book works on its own there, don't you think? I think it works all the way around, and I think the reason is that it makes something that this day and age we're hearing so much about, like with
The Secret, as you mentioned earlier, and there's the law of attraction, and there's the power of intention. Everybody's trying to figure out, how come all these people are spouting this stuff off, and I'm sitting here in my misery, and it just isn't working? And the fact is, the way you put it in this book is you show it's about action. It's about facing each and every moment of your life and making a choice in that moment.
Yes.
And you make it tangible just by that particular, what do I want to say? Experience isn't really the word I'm looking. Example is the word I'm looking for. And that's it. You just live, you talk, and you breathe it, and you are it. That's just how it is.
Well, thank you. Thanks. It's been great being with you, Daniel. It really has.
A pleasure to have you on the program again. Like I said, you kind of go into the realm that you're supposed to be in or that you want to be in, and it's just been amazing the people that I've been able to talk with. And I even have people this day and age like, you talk to them? And yeah, for about an hour or so.
Well, you created that, dude.
Right.
And you created that from the heart that you are, and I truly, truly get that. So thank you. It's just been lovely sharing with you.
You bet. I hope for the opportunity we can revisit this again in the future.
I'm there.
All
Anytime.
right. Bright Light is the book, Spiritual Lessons from a Life in Acting. Dee Wallace, thank you for being on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Thank you, and many blessings.
You bet.
Bye.
We also want to thank you, the listeners, for tuning in. Be sure to visit us at our website, which is beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. Sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter. I'm Daniel Davis. Again, thank you for joining us. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.